I have soloed just about all of South America on a motorcycle. So far, I've crossed 7 countries, I've traveled about 12,000 miles, and I did it all for a chance to fly in random places where no one has flown before. My goal was to show you a different perspective from the air in places where people would never go. Oh yeah, and I did this whole trip while carrying a paramotor, which is basically a 60-pound hunk of metal and a paragliding wing. And I did it all on the back of a motorcycle with all my clothes and shoes and my camera equipment and computer and tools and all the other odds and ends that I could stuff in the panniers. I started in Colombia, then I went to Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Argentina, Paraguay, and then Brazil, which is where the trip ended up for the time being, or at least until the rain stops, but I'll get to that later in the video. This started as a journey and ended up being a full-on adventure. It was fraught with problem after problem and miraculous solutions that came out of nowhere. For every hurdle, there was a silver lining. For every issue, there was a resolution. For all the troubles, there was always someone there who was willing to give me a helping hand. This was the ultimate test of faith, and endurance, and patience, and ultimately perseverance. This was my road never traveled. And the first mile, well, that was the hardest, and it almost ended the journey before it even started. You see, the idea was to attach a trailer to the motorcycle. Enter Carlos, the first of many welders that I would need along this journey. Carlos and I designed a one-wheeled trailer that we thought would be perfect for the South American roads. Little did we know that this idea was probably the worst idea I could come up with, and, well, this would cause weeks of headaches while I was on the road. Sure, we tested the trailer, but we did it in the most unscientific way possible, but boy did we have fun.
Are you okay? my hand is not comfortable for my Okay. Okay, let me...
I'll go up and I'll turn
Yeah. With me?
Really?
Yes. If you can do it.
I can do it.
Okay. Rivals in Colombia.
Wow, it's difficult.
I'm starting fluent. Okay, let's go and turn around. Rivals in Colombia. It's crazy, man.
After finishing the trailer, I would head out from my house in San Felix, Colombia, and embark on the epic journey of a lifetime. Or so I thought. The trailer didn't even make it a kilometer before it broke. Thankfully, I had my good friend Leo with me, and he and I would get the motorcycle down to the local motorcycle shop, which just happened to be owned by another good friend of mine named Mario. Mario would then find us a welder to fix the problem. Enter Alberto, welder number 2. Alberto would do his best to fix the trailer, but in the process he would blow out a fuse on the motorcycle, which meant Leo and I would have to push the motorcycle all the way back up to my house. And once again, the journey was going nowhere fast. But the next morning, I would try again to head out from my house in San Felix and embark on the epic journey of a lifetime. Until a mile down the road, a policeman stopped me to let me know that a one-wheeled trailer was the dumbest idea he'd ever seen. Fortunately, he let me continue to be the biggest idiot in Colombia and sent me on my way, where I went to San Cristobal and then eventually the metropolis of Medellin. On the way, I would need to stop a couple of times to adjust the tarp or trailer or something or other, but at least at this point I was traveling, and I'd made my way all the way to the city of Puerto Barrio. And this is where I made my very first flight of the journey, over the beautiful Magdalena River. Driving a motorcycle carrying a lot of weight on a one-wheeled trailer is a stupid idea. But either from a lack of brain cells or just pure stubbornness on my part, it took me a while to figure this out. But I was bound and determined to do this come hell or high water. Or in this case, Blancas water, whatever that means. That was because the next place I stopped was because I had found the perfect gas station to fly from in a place called Aguas Blancas. But at the time, I didn't know I'd be stuck there for a week at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. You see, this gas station had some welders, and they were adamant that a one-wheeled trailer was a really stupid idea, and they assured me that they could alleviate all my problems by making a two-wheeled trailer. Enter Arle, welder number 3, and his protege Jason. The silver lining on being stuck at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by the cartel on one side and guerrillas on the other, is that it gave me several opportunities to fly over this beautiful area of Colombia that few visitors ever got to see. The guys fixed my trailer and I was off once again. But 35 minutes later, I was stranded on the side of the road once again, and I was in need of another welder. Enter welder number 4, and I never did get the guy's name, but thankfully he was able to fix the issue enough so I could at least hobble to the city of La Breja. There, I would find, yep, you guessed it, another welder. While in La Breja, I met a taxi driver named Ivan, and Ivan took me on a tour of the city where we ended up in the biggest tourist attraction there, which was a giant pineapple. Meet welder number 5. He was a really nice guy, and it was actually a group of guys, and they did an absolutely great job with the other piece of crap that they had to work with. And that was enough to get me down the mountain and to the city of San Alberto, where I met the coolest rancher named Javier. Javier let me hang out with him and his family, and this was one of the best flights of the entire adventure. Unfortunately, however, my GoPro failed to film it, but this was a flight I will always remember. Oh, and I also met his friends, and they wanted to pretend they were gangsters or something, which was a bit weird and awkward, and yeah, let's just move on. From there, I would stay in the city of Palitos, where I would stay for just one night because it was one of those places where it's marked red on the map by government agencies warning people not to go there, which is actually really good advice because as I was traveling through said red marked area, a man tried to stab me with a knife and steal all my stuff. The would-be thief was unsuccessful, and after the police told me I was stupid for being in this area and then told me to leave, I found an absolute paradise in Cienega Magdalena named Chevre Beach. This place was amazing, and my host Luca and I would fly around this Caribbean hideaway. After so many troubles with the trailer, this was a slice of heaven. Well, it would have been perfect, except the trailer broke again. Enter welder number 6. Fixing the errors of the last 5 welders, this guy decided the best course of action for the hunk of metal riding on bicycle tires behind my motorcycle was brute force. So he welded up as many brace pieces as he could, and while they were working on that, I took one more flight around this paradise. Eventually, I was on my way again, and this time I ended up in a town named Malombo. Here, I would meet my new friend, David, who, as it happens, was not a welder, thank God. David introduced me to this great town and the fabulous people here. I also had the opportunity to once again take to the sky and show the world another beautiful place so few people have ever even heard of. I would leave Malombo with heavy heart. It was one of those places that just made you feel like family. But I took to the road, and this time I arrived in San Juan Nepomuceno, Bolivia, which is really hard to say, and I'm not sure why the name Bolivia is at the end of the name, because it's in Colombia. Anyway, I wasn't able to fly there due to the high winds in the area, but I did have some famous cookies. After the delicious treats, from there I would head south through the Andes Mountains, and once again in one of those red zone areas you're not supposed to go. And I was there at midnight. Oh, and the trailer fell off the motorcycle while I was driving down the mountains. Not kidding, I was driving, it was at night, and I felt a bump on the trailer, and it drove right past me and crashed into the side of the road, where I was stuck in one of the most famous areas of cartels in all of Colombia. Remember when I told you the trailer was probably a really bad idea? Yeah, it was this event that finally made me understand that. Okay, so here's what's happened. Finally, somebody stopped and helped me. What's your name? Help me. Ellie Mustard. And his brilliant idea is to take this, tie it to the trailer, tie the trailer to the motorcycle with the lock, and maybe that'll work. I don't know, it's really sketchy, but if I can go slow, I only have to go 3 kilometers to find a welder, so we're gonna try it. I don't know if the camera's working great here, but fortunately a nice guy helped me off the side of the road, and we tied the trailer to the motorcycle and drove to, yes, you guessed it, welder number 7. So what happened is the hitch broke off from this piece here, and you can see that this is just hollow. So not a great design to begin with, but what's new? It's just the latest in the trailer saga. So, all right, welder number 7 now, and I was really hyping up the trailer, but this time it's not really the trailer, it's the hitch, but technically it's the trailer. So finally, back at my house in San Felix, I had the great idea to get rid of the trailer. Enter welder number 8 and the end of the trailer. While I was waiting for the welder to finish the modifications on the motorcycle rack, I took a flight around Guatapé from a tiny island with my good friend Ruben and Carlos, who was welder number 1, and there were also some pilots there visiting from Brazil. Now that the new trailer was gone and the new configuration was ready, I was off once again to see the beautiful countryside of South America. At this point, I had done all of northern Colombia, and I was gonna head south. Well, the trailer is now thrown away. It's garbage, it's trash, I threw it away. And instead, what we ended up with is this. So the paramotor is on the back with the paraglider. The metal panniers are to carry stuff and to protect the paramotor if the bike ever falls over. Now the problem is with this configuration is there's a lot of weight really high and up on the back. And you can see most of that weight is aft of the axle. So, not sure if this situation is going to work, but we're gonna give it a try because the trailer, frankly, was just too dangerous to keep driving. Before leaving, however, I was invited to do some paragliding with my good friends before I left, but soon the adventure would need to continue. So I'd head south to the city of Manizales, where I celebrated the new year with a lovely family I had just met that day. Heading south once again, I just happened to stop in the city of Tuluá because I saw a soccer field that I could fly from. This city, however, would soon change my life because here I met my good friend Mauricio, a fantastic paragliding pilot, and it was he that invited me to visit Piedichinche, which is one of the premier paragliding spots in all of Colombia. Mauricio would take me up the mountain at Piedichinche, where I'd get my first taste of this paragliding heaven. After that, however, I decided to have some fun with my paramotor down in the valley, and it was here that I'd meet some of the household names that paragliding pilots always talk about. My journey was going from great to fantastic, and APCO, a paragliding manufacturer out of Israel, would lend me a wing to fly from this wonderland and experience what makes this place so special. But as amazing as it was to enjoy this incredible playground in the sky, the motorcycle was having some major issues, and the work that needed to be done, unfortunately, was not a quick fix. For 6 weeks, I'd be stuck in the city of Cali, Colombia, waiting for the repairs on the motorcycle. So, what do you do when you're stranded in the middle of Colombia? You go to really sketchy neighborhoods and make stupid videos about plants. Yeah, I was bored. But after the long wait, the motorcycle was good to go, and so I headed south towards Popayán. I had many miles to go. I wasn't pulling a trailer, and I finally felt like the journey was making progress. What I didn't know, though, was I was about to get a small taste of what traversing over the Andes Mountains really entailed. Beautiful as they were, the Colombian section of the Andes Mountains were tough. Traveling over dirt roads through pass after pass, reality was starting to kick in. I was alone, I was in the middle of nowhere, and my adventure was not going to be easy. This was exactly what I was looking for.
And every once in a while you come across a turn and get to see something like this. God, this country's beautiful. This is going to be a bit stressful here.
Finally, I'd make it down to the small town of Macoa, where I'd meet the coolest Scot named Gav, who stole the keys to my motorcycle while I was flying. But Gav was either too stoned to know how to drive a motorcycle or too stoned to care. But when we found a crazy bird's nest that looked like something he'd smoke, then he found his happy place. And so did I, because the views flying here were fantastic and made the long trip over the mountains totally worth it. From Macoa, I would head south towards Ecuador, but not before losing my brakes while I was heading down a mountain, which made for a pretty scary moment. But what do you need brakes for? They only slow you down, and I needed to put another stamp on my passport, which I did. After the most bizarre conversation with the Ecuadorian Border Patrol, who didn't speak any English and really didn't understand my gringo Spanish. But I guess they either got tired of me or just got frustrated with my lack of understanding and sent me on my way to explore the beautiful country of Ecuador, which started off with a tour of a farm full of the most amazing fruits I'd ever tasted, and a really long worm, and another amazing flight over the jungle. Ecuador was turning out to be better than I expected, and the people I met there were just as giving and friendly as those I had met up north. Things were going perfectly. Traveling through Ecuador was better than I expected. I was able to make some amazing flights here, witness a spectacular culture, and the beauty of this amazing country was breathtaking. I cannot describe the beauty of this country. The landscapes were something you'd only read about in books, and the people here were so friendly and welcoming. And the waterfalls, so many waterfalls. Ecuador was perfect. Well, that is until I hit a rock slide and crashed and almost lost my motorcycle when the second rock slide came. Oh, and then the gear selector pedal broke, which meant I couldn't drive my motorcycle, so I had to load the motorcycle into the back of a truck to be driven to the next town and look for yet another motorcycle mechanic. But thankfully, the people I met along the way helped me out once again. This journey actually could not have been accomplished without the wonderful people of South America that would help me out in a bind. Somewhere in the middle of Ecuador, I ran out of cash, and without an ATM even remotely close to me, I hopped on the bike, hoping I wouldn't run out of gas, and went north to the city of Santa Rosa in hopes that there was an ATM that I could coax some of those beloved greenbacks out of. I found the ATM I was looking for, and that day just happened to be my birthday. So my wonderful friend and host at the small hotel I was staying in threw me a birthday party with cake and song and great camaraderie. Once again, the people I'd meet along the way treated me like family and really made me feel very special. Thanks, Vincencio, for the cake. The icing on the cake was a beautiful flight on the beach of the Pacific where I'd meet more friends. This trip was really making my heart happy. That flight would be my last in Ecuador, as I would head south to the border of Peru, and crossing the border there turned out to be a very complicated task. Fortunately, I met a fully patched member of a biker gang named Mac, who would befriend me, and together we would both get lost in this process and the crazy bureaucracy. Mac would soon take off as he was on his own adventure, and I would head south to the deserts of Peru. Somewhere in these deserts, in a town called Piura, is where I'd meet a man named Edison and his family. This guy is the nicest motorcycle taxi driver, and Edison would quickly become a very dear friend of mine. And that friendship would soon be tested, as the motorcycle would break down again, and we'd need to find yet another motorcycle mechanic. But the favor was soon returned when Edison's motorcycle also needed repairs. So together we would come to the conclusion that motorcycles were not exactly the most reliable forms of transportation on the planet. Leaving Edison behind and heading south through the desert, the wonderful women at a random gas station would quickly find out why I named my motorcycle the Great Balance Machine. And after supplying the ground with ample amount of perfectly good gasoline and hoping no one in the area was smoking at the time, I'd continue south until I found a cool little tunnel that led to a beach with the worst winds on the planet, which quickly dashed any of my hopes of being able to fly along the coast of Peru. I really wanted to fly on the coast of Peru. Unfortunately, however, the winds were just too strong, and I was becoming a little heartbroken. Down the coast and through the deserts of Peru I would go, praying I wouldn't break down or get blown over from the fierce winds in the area, which, by the way, were just a warm-up for what I was to encounter later. I trudged along mile after mile after mile, wondering just how long South America really is. Fun fact, it's really, really long. Eventually, I'd find a place to fly in a town named Barranca. After weeks of being beaten on the motorcycle, it was a great relief to finally get in the air and see the Peruvian coastline from the sky. But the relief didn't last long, as once again I needed to hop on the motorcycle and head further south to the city of Lima, where the police got mad at me for heading the wrong way on a highway where motorcycles are not allowed to go anyway, and using my translator app and acting as stupid as I could, he'd point me in the right direction, which meant more wind and more desert. But I found a great place to fly in the desert in a small town named Paracas. But not only did I get to fly there, but I also met up with an archaeologist who took me out into the desert, and we got to dig up mummies that were thousands of years old. Finding and holding a skull from someone who died millennia ago was surreal, and not at all creepy, until you dug up some hair and flesh, and then it got a little bit creepy. But finding this place was a once-in-a-lifetime experience and something I will never forget. And to fly over this area where I'd find all the mummies was more than I could ever hope for. And speaking of once-in-a-lifetime experiences, after I'd left the town of Paracas, I'd head to the city of Nazca, where those famous petroglyphs are that were made long ago that you can only see from the sky. Well, after a long trek through more and more desert, I actually got to fly over the Nazca lines. Super restricted airspace here, and I was denied entry more than once, and I can't tell you how I got permission to fly over them, but I actually got permission to fly over the Nazca lines. To relate how rare this is would take me hours, but put it this way, no one gets permission to fly over these incredible structures, and never on a paramotor. But here I was, flying over the Nazca lines and pinching myself that this was really happening. From here, I would leave the nice desert and enter the formidable Andes Mountains. This would be my first taste of what not having oxygen would be like, and this was just the beginning of these incredible behemoths. I would end up being in the Andes Mountains for weeks. Gorgeous, incredible, amazing, breathtaking. Nothing can describe the grandeur and the size of this incredible mountain range. Oh, and I forgot, cold and windy and super high altitudes where there's no air and... Oh yeah, and there are megaliths up here too. Giant stones built by who knows who. Complexes so incredible and awe-inspiring, and super cool masonry that makes you scratch your head and wondering why they were built and who built them. I stopped in Cusco, which is a world-famous hangout for alien and Nephilim conspiracy authors and YouTubers, but after seeing these incredible places, even I was left scratching my head. I'm not sure who made them or when, but I felt very fortunate to see them up close and to capture the inspiration they bring for just being there. From Cusco onward through the Andes was going to be the toughest part of the journey. At the top of the Andes is a huge basin, which has crazy winds and icy cool temperatures at altitudes that are higher than the peaks of the Rocky Mountains. This was tough. This was brutal. And I'm still amazed that I accomplished this section of the journey without the motorcycle breaking down. Here I would skate along the edge of Lake Titicaca, the greatest name for a lake ever, which will be forever known as Lake Booby Juice, or Milk for short. Yeah, the high altitude got me on this leg of the journey, and unfortunately I'd be up here for a while. You have no idea the crazy names I gave to alpacas, but this is a family-friendly channel and we'll just leave that there. From Lake Titicaca, I would cross the border into Bolivia and start off in the city of La Paz. Oh, remember when the Great Balance Machine was tipped over at the gas station in Peru? Yeah, I thought about that moment a lot as I was traversing along the basin at over 13,000 feet in a country that now has restrictions on gasoline, and in most places, it is illegal to sell gasoline to foreigners. Yeah. This wasn't the greatest situation, but fortunately I found some lovely people that would happily sell me that illegal contraband known as petrol, and somehow, and I still don't know how, I made it from town to town on fumes. Until I got lost, and then got on the right road again thanks to some drunk guys and their very clear and coherent directions. Not.
My name is
Pare is
Sucre.
Heading down the back side of the Andes, and I'd meet some helpful kids that failed to warn me that the town I was in the middle of a presidential coup, and the gunfire I was hearing in the background was from the military trying to take over the government. But be that as it may, I would continue to head down the Andes and buy illegal gasoline all the way to the city of Santa Cruz de la Sierra, where I'd pick up the infamous Evil Villain number 42. With my great nemesis in tow and still figuring out how to get gasoline, I'd cross the border into Argentina, where Evil Villain number 42 would promptly get kicked off her bus and held by Border Patrol for, well, basically being evil, I guess. And of course, using her evil powers, I would break my chain and get stranded in the middle of nowhere. But once again, I would be saved by some very friendly locals who would tow the motorcycle to their workshop. While I was there, I took the time to go in the air and see the beautiful town of Embarcation. The elation of landing to a crowd of onlookers who were fascinated by my magic shower curtain. This was a very special day for me. I can't describe how wonderful the people of Argentina were to me or how welcomed I felt there. This was truly special. This was the epitome of what this whole adventure was about. New friends would welcome us into their homes like family. It was the people here that made this place. And I really felt like this place was something I could only wish for. But alas, I would need to move on, and through the plains of Argentina I'd go, where the motorcycle broke down once again due to the gear selector pedal. So I hobbled to the closest town and met the coolest guy ever. Jesus, the mechanic, who would create a miracle and fix my motorcycle. For a little while anyways, because as soon as I arrived in Formosa, the bike would need one more mechanic. Formosa was beautiful and such a lovely, peaceful city. But once again, it was time to make another border crossing, and this time into the beautiful country of Paraguay. Just across the border, I happened to find another paramotor pilot driving on the road, and he invited me to go fly over an absolutely stunning landscape. This was yet another outstanding flight, provided to me by complete strangers who quickly became friends. If there is one thing I've learned on this journey, it's that it doesn't matter if you share the same culture or language or religion or skin color or whatever. What matters is that there are people who are full of friendliness and love all over the world. It's up to you to go find them. This world is truly a special place full of very warm-hearted people. And while I was having the time of my life, Evil Villain number 42 was...
Try not to use the bathroom on the bus. Just trust me on this. Don't use the bathroom on the bus.
Anyway, when I finally did meet up with her, we found some amazing waterfalls at the world's largest waterfall system, Foz do Iguazu. And if by chance you're thinking, that place must have a lot of mosquitoes. Well, you'd be right. And they just happen to carry the world's worst diseases. And if by chance you're wondering what dengue fever looks like, well, here it is. Or malaria or some other crazy disease that Evil Villain 42 caught. So she ended up going home after a few weeks, and then I caught the same disease. You gotta love mosquitoes. While I was recovering, I got invited to see the Seoul paragliding manufacturing plant. This was one of the best highlights of my journey. Ari, the owner, took me on a private tour and taught me all about making these magic shower curtains. And while I was there, I met a pretty famous man in the paragliding world named Gatino, or the Kitten, albeit his real name is Mauricio. And Gatino would take me on some amazing flights over the beautiful and stunning southern Brazil. He'd also invite me to watch and participate in a paramotor safety course in a city about 17 hours away. I quickly accepted, and it was an absolute pleasure to watch the pilots own their skills on this sport, which I really, really love. Unfortunately, the course ended on a bad note when one of the pilots made a mistake in a maneuver.
Muito bonito esse ali.
And although he suffered multiple injuries, thankfully he survived. With heavy heart once again, I'd leave a place that I'd met lots of friends, and I would head up north to Guyana. And there I would find yet another, you guessed it, motorcycle mechanic. But this mechanic was a bit different than the others. This was Paulo, and he just happened to be a paramotor pilot as well. Paulo would not only fix my bike, but he would also take me on some wonderful flights throughout the area. Paulo quickly became a dear friend, and while waiting on parts to arrive from the US, I wouldn't be bored thanks to this awesome man who helped me out and finally fixed my motorcycle correctly. While I was waiting for the motorcycle to be overhauled, I would meet up with Gatino once again by heading south to witness the Brazilian Paramotor Championships. 3 full days of fun in the sun as I'd watch pilots compete in various events such as navigation, fuel consumption, launches and landings, and showing off many more skills that are needed to fly these amazing machines. Each day there were pilots that would entertain the crowds and even some light shows as well. What a great way to fill a weekend. After the festivities, I would head back up north and spend some more time with Paulo, both in the shop and in the air. And a quick stop on the way back to visit a paragliding repair shop, which, by the way, I need to get a hold of him because I have a wing. Okay, anyway, back to Guyana, where I'd visit once again with the paramotor group that Paulo introduced me to. Fly over a castle and a famous singer's house. And when I thought I'd flown everywhere in the area, they talked me into going on another road trip back down south to fly the beaches of Sao Paulo. It seemed like all the weekends in Brazil were so fun. This one was full of sun and beaches, and of course, getting to see everything from the air. I can't say enough great things about this paramotor group that Paulo introduced me to, or any of the amazing people I've met on my journey. It seems everywhere I go, I was met with kindness and smiles and just good friendship. Although I didn't speak the language or understand the culture as much as I should, I felt at ease in Brazil. Relaxation and flying were just par for the course, until I got arrested for filming the police. But if you want more of that story, watch episode 47. On the way back from Sao Paulo, we got stuck in the world's largest traffic jam, a massive accident that had the interstate backed up for tens and tens of miles. So, I decided to fly over it with my paramotor, but not before meeting up with that guy who repairs wings. And man, I really need to go hold of that guy. And meeting some creepy clown too. But flying over the interstate in a massive traffic jam was actually pretty cool, because there is no better way to make everybody jealous on the ground while they're waiting at a traffic jam and look up and say, man, I really need to get one of those things. Unfortunately, I had to land where I took off because we were still over 6 hours outside of our destination. But instead of driving because of said traffic jam, we decided to check out some aliens and beer barrels. Finally back in Guyana, once again, Paulo would finalize the items needed for the motorcycle, and we would go on a long road trip through the rain to a quaint little town full of beers and, of course, fly once again with the group. And because the motorcycle was finally ready to get on the road again, I would need to head north, through the most confusing toll booth ever created, and back to the journey, heading towards the... Oh wait, the motorcycle would break down again, but thanks to the confusing toll booth where I had paid a fortune, I was given a free tow ride to the closest gas station, where I'd meet, you guessed it, another motorcycle mechanic. Thankfully, this time it was just a worn out chain, so back on the road I'd go once again, after, of course, watching locals ride bulls through the town, which, for some reason, I was the only person who thought that was a bit strange. Heading north again, until in the rain, I decided to run into a random fence that was absolutely not marked by fence posts. Nope. There were no fence posts to be seen here, so of course I would run into a fence. After all, who else would think there'd be wires strung across an open yard where, of course, there are no fence posts, just these strange poles sticking out of the ground for some unknown reason. Anyway, after that great calamity, I would continue to head north, where I'd meet some cool missionaries whose moms were super worried about them, and they would point me in the direction of some food. And then, after a good night's rest, I would stumble across the horrific scene of a truck that decided going into the river was much more fun than using the bridge. And finally, after what seemed like driving for eternity, I'd reached New York City. Or wait, no, this was the city of Belém, nestled on the Amazon River, where I'd finally run out of roads. So, I would take a barge across the river to the town of Barcarena, where I'd meet up with a friend I had met in Guyana and go fishing and eat some purple fruit named acai, which is, by the way, super healthy, but in order to eat it, you have to add a lot of sugar, which kind of defeats the entire purpose. Out of roads and not knowing where to go next, I'd meet one of the coolest and smartest people I've ever met in my life. A guy with a funny name named Eustachio. And in order to remember his name, I had to think of pistachios. which is probably what I called him sometimes because his name is really hard for me to remember. Anyway, Pistachio is an amazing paramotor pilot, and he would take me up and down to go fly the mouth of the Amazon River in some pretty sketchy, windy conditions. But being in the air with him was loads of fun, and his wife makes excellent barbecue, which I'd helped myself to on more than one occasion. Estacio even took me to the Oscars, well, the Brazilian high school version anyway, where I'd see future filmmakers of the world show off their skills and artistic stories. Leaving Barcarena meant heading deep into the Amazon rainforest, and the only way to get there was by boat. That meant loading everything up onto the boat and spending 5 days traversing the channels and wide berths of this amazing river system. It also meant living in a really tiny room with cockroaches and some other strange bugs that I'd rather not think about, but the views of the Amazon were so stunning and beautiful that it made the 5-day trek seem pleasant, and I was overjoyed by this experience. During the adventure down the river, I was able to get off at Santarém and explore a nature reserve, which was really just a big zoo with cool paths through the forest. And along the way, I'd meet Bruno, who pointed me out a phenomenon along the river. And this is called the meeting of the waters, and it's where the Rio Negro meets up with the Amazon River. This wasn't going to be my last encounter with this fantastic merger, but first, Bruno would help me get the motorcycle and paramotor off the boat once we docked in Manaus. Manaus turned out to be an unexpected blessing, both visually as well as the people I'd meet there. I'd met a paramotor pilot named Fernando, and he introduced me to his paramotor group as well. Here, over the rainforest, swamps, floodplains of the Amazon, I would have some of the best flights of the journey. There are no words I can use to describe how wonderful it felt to fly over this area. The views, the smell, the freshness of the air, all of this was topped off by the chance to fly over the meeting of the waters, which would be my last flight here. And to my surprise, dolphins were swimming beneath me as if to say, goodbye and thanks for all the fish, or something like that. Whatever it was magical. And this is where the journey for season 1 would end. At this amazing place, with these amazing people, and it ended all because it started to rain. And during the rainy season, well, there's a reason it's called the rainforest. And all of that leads us back here to Manaus, and this bridge that crosses the Rio Negro, because it's here that we now begin the next season. Sure, I've done a lot of things while I've been waiting for the rains to subside, but I'll tell you about that in the next video. Where should I go from here, and where will I find places to fly? I guess I'll figure that out as I go along, kind of how I've always done things. But for now, you're all caught up. So welcome to Season 2.